All right, thank you very much, team. Good songs. And that's where we're going this morning. Those songs have been carefully chosen and prepared in light of the passage in Matthew chapter 5. If you've been with us this last few weeks, we're in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. So welcome back to the Mount if you've been with us already, or we could say welcome to the hillside. The picture we were showing last Sunday depicts a place in Israel on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. It's really just a sloping hillside, just not far from the town of Capernaum, if you've ever heard of that place. Peter, and they call it, to a certain degree, the hometown of Peter and Jesus. There's this hillside there, very beautiful, sloping, and it's occupied by a farmer and his crops. So tourists can't go traipsing around. You just take a picture of it from afar. But that's, they believe to be the setting for this and where we're going, this revolutionary, almost radical message that Jesus preached, taught, probably a lengthy message distilled down into basically 10 minutes of reading for us, which is like a good-sized TED Talk in today's reference anyway. Stunning. He's delivering like a stunning new matter of living for them. And they were probably taking notes, quill and parchment, or they had good memories and they captured it afterward for sure. New way of living in a new kingdom. Things are coming. It's going to be new. And this was early in his ministry, and it was very strategic as well. So he's got his best friends, his followers, gathered around him there. And it's like, okay, here it is, guys. Here's the deal. This is how life will look and how it will work out when there is glad submission to my lordship. He even started while he was still with them as well. In a word, what are they going to look like? What will life look like for you? You're going to look different. All in favor of looking different. I mean, nobody really likes to be, well, we want to be unique, but not that different. Nobody likes to be really, really different, because then you're just seen as odd or strange, or maybe even obtuse. Different can be different, can be difficult. In a world where different is, well, it's kind of frowned upon. People that think they're really unique aren't that different. They're just copying somebody else that's a little bit different. But there's no one who's really totally different from anyone else. And if you think you want to be different, that can be very difficult as well. And it was difficult in this day as well. These were the days of Roman occupation. Don't stand out, don't make waves, don't cause a fuss, just go with the flow, don't make the Romans mad. Well, Christians were going to stand out and be different as well. Just look around as you dare to stand out for different priorities, different values. How does that go for you? That's what the Sermon on the Mount is really pushing for. It's going to be, it's a nail he's going to pound over and over again. As we said, most people just think they're looking really different. Even people that seem to look really radical and out there, left or right, are really just following somebody else. They're not that different. While we follow the Lord, though, we are bound to be a little bit different. These group of sayings, beatitudes, as we've called them, are quite a collection, and that's why we highlighted last time just how paradoxical, that was the word, Jesus tended to be. Hard to imagine that last is first, or last will be first, that giving is receiving, that losing will result in finding, that when you consider yourself poor, you're actually rich, that weakness becomes strength. Hard to believe that as well. Well, here's the first of our next three in the Beatitudes list. Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 5. It's not on the screen, so if you have a Bible open this morning, just prop it open there. We're not going too far. It's just 3 sections this morning, but they're powerful. And then we'll get to the end, and we'll sort of recap them all, because they all work together and they flow together. It's dealing with the pure. We're going to look at how it's going to be single-mindedness. Keep that in mind. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, or the pure of heart, either pure in heart or pure of heart. Bibles will have both, for they will see God. Simple enough. It's looking at really the depths of devotion. Remember that blessed, we looked at last time, is a positive statement by God about the individual that means to be approved or to find final approval. It just doesn't mean you're happy. Happy comes, happy goes. It's much more than that. Now, you will result in joy and happiness, but it's this idea of approval from God. When God blesses us, He's approving of us. The idea and wording here of pure in heart was a well-known phrase in the Bible already. Do we see that elsewhere in the Bible? Do we see that much in the Old Testament? Pure in heart? Pure in heart? It's all over the place. The pure in heart. It's repeated. It's in Psalm 24. The pure in heart may approach the Lord in worship. Who may approach your holy hill? Those who are pure in heart. It was a common phrase. Psalm 17:15 and Psalm 42:2. The pure in heart will see God. They knew this phrase already. It was common. Psalm 73:1 and 13. They will have the right attitudes. They will have the right motives as well. Now in the New Testament, pure, a little bit different. A lot of the same continuity there, but there's different words for pure. There's about 3 different words for pure. We just have one word, pure, with some explanations. But the word here might have the sense of pure in the sense of being clean, yes, but more generally it's used as something that is unmixed with other things. It is pure. That's how they used this particular word. Like when, in their context, the wine has not been mixed with water. Now, they commonly mixed wine with water. They cut it down a little bit. They diluted it. It was very common in that day because they drank it all the time. They realized that by putting a little wine in the water, it killed something in there. They didn't understand pathogens, but it made you sick. So you put a little wine in the water and poof, pathogens are gone. I feel fine. So they did it all the time. When you didn't cut it down, either 3-1 or 10-1 were common, it was described as pure, this word. It was pure, not mixed, not diluted. That's the intent of this particular statement here. It's a sense of being unmixed with other things. The word, 2 words, single-minded, is likely a good description. Think about it. Single-minded. I didn't really think of pure and single-minded in the same phrase, but that's kind of what it's doing here as well. It's kind of the attitude that Paul, the apostle, spoke of when he declared in Philippians 3:13, this one thing I do. One thing. He didn't say these 5 things or these 3 things or these 10 things. This one thing. Doesn't mean he didn't have other interests, but just that there was one thing, there was something that was central in his life that all the other priorities, all the other interests and activities were subject to. There was a center, there was a core. That's the idea. The psalmist would put it this way, Psalm 86:11, give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name. Look up Psalm 86:11. It's a great little verse there as well. The heart is simply a description of the center of your being, as in Proverbs 4:23. Guard your heart with all due diligence, for out of it flow the issues of life. There's a place where your life and your heart starts and it flows from. It's like your source. You want to guard it, protect it. Can you say with confidence that my heart, my life, has only one main priority and all others are in subjugation to it? That's what he's trying to encourage here as well. Everything aligns with it as well in terms of a personal mission statement or a life verse or something like that. Ever done a life verse? Usually it talks about these things that are my focus, that are at my core, that I really value. Something the Bible from the Bible that helps center them. It grounds them for life. The result here, what does he say? Blessed are the pure in heart, because for then they will, or because of that, they will what? They will see God. Interesting phrase. Let's knock it around a little bit. It's always what we see, anyway, just visually, when we're talking about seeing, we're talking about visual seeing, is always a reflection of really what God has made and what He's created in our world. That's a good perspective. When God created, He did so originally and completely, and as far as we know, He did so with no model or analog to copy from. He just made things, and there they were. He's the great creator and designer for all that we see. But everything we create or fashion or compose comes from a reference to the world that God has already made. Where am I going with this? Everything we see has a God reference to it. It's got to have a God reference. It's already part of God's design. If something inspires us, it's God's fingerprints are going to be on that already. We cannot really create or design anything that God has not already designed for us. We just improve on it maybe, or we tweak it around, or we do this or that with it. We see him in all creation. We can see him in all creation. Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. When an artist, and maybe there's some artists here, when you paint or create something, you usually have some sort of a reference in mind. Even the great artists of old, Leonardo da Vinci, they say, always had a reference in mind. When he painted the Mona Lisa, he actually had a reference in mind. It was his good friend, really wealthy guy. It was his wife, Lisa. Lisa Giocondo. He had her in mind. It was a reference, something to reflect on rather than just, I have no idea what I'm going to paint here. I'm just going to paint as well. So with the proper glasses on, proper perspective, which is a singular eye, I'll say for God's glory, you will see God always and everywhere. I will see him. I will see him. Blessed are those who are looking for that, who are conscious of that, who are aware of that. I have this singular vision. I am pure in heart. Then you'll see it all the time. You'll see it everywhere you look as well. And of course, God will be present in circumstances as well. We've been singing about that this morning. You look for God in circumstances. He's there. We no longer need to fear any event or situation that we didn't anticipate because God's already there. He's already in tomorrow. He's already in next week. He's already in next year as well. He's already there. He sovereignly works out all things for his purposes and for our good. There's a verse we saw a few months back that was talking about that. It's in the book of Romans. And guess what that verse is? He works all things together for our good. What's the verse? Romans 8:28. And if you have a really good memory, that was back in November of last year. But my memory's not even that good. So improve your vision. Improve your vision, we could say here. Those who are pure in heart will see God. Not a literal seeing, of course, but they'll be aware of his presence. At least you won't see him yet anyway. One day, every eye will see him. But one day, will we all see him eventually one day? Will we see him? We'll be able to see him physically. But when we are single-minded in our attitude towards the Lord, I think we'll see him around us everywhere all the time. What a gift that is. What a privilege that is. You just see him surrounding you. Los Angeles Times once ran a story concerning a lady named Anna Marie Penica. She was born blind and eventually married a man she met at Braille class. And Anna May had never experienced, sunsets or blue skies, and he had always exuded just a remarkable spirit. And for 15 years, her husband then was the eyes in the relationship. He still had vision until he lost his vision to retinitis pigmentosa. And then he was blind. Then after many years of marriage, she was offered a revolutionary new surgery. This was in 1981. To deal with her congenital cataracts. And guess what happened? She could see. She now had sight. She had 20/30 vision, which they say is good enough to pass your driver's test. I don't know what I am. But she could see. Now, she was the seeing one in the marriage as well. So the gift of sight is marvelous. It's incredible. It's good. Can you imagine not having the gift of sight? But the gift of seeing and seeing all that God has for us and being aware of him around us. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, because they will see God. That is something totally different as well. Keep that in mind. Next one is the peacemakers. I'd like to put a little pause between the words. Peacemakers. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What are some of the qualities of a peacemaker? What kind of person? Probably marching to the beat of a different drum. They can make a unique difference in the world for God's glory, I trust, I hope. Is a peacemaker someone who can do that as well? What is a peacemaker? Is he referring to the 193 members of United Nations who sit in New York trying to solve the world's problems and all the hot spots? Are they the peacemakers? No, they're probably, if anything, they're more like peacekeepers, trying to do that as well. It's not that. Very different things. Peacekeepers are, mum with the boys. Each of you go to your own corners, behave yourself. Go to your room, keep the peace. What does the peacemaker do? Now come on back together, we need to reconcile here. It's time to reconcile, make things right. Peacemaking, peacekeeping as well. Historians tell us that for almost, 3,500 years of recorded human history now, they estimate there have only been 268 years when there has never been any conflict on this planet. I mean, war, conflict. Talk about peacemaking, peacekeeping. It's part of our experience, always has been. So what might Jesus be referring to? As James says in his letter, in chapter 4, verse 1, all problems start with people. And unless you can change the people, you can never change anything. We can't exchange all the people on the planet, can we? I mean, we are what we are, and we're part of the problem too. You can't do that, but you can, and this is part of our mission we see for the gospel for Christ, we can see people changed. We're always preaching, teaching to see people changed as well. People can have reconciliation and peace with God through Christ, Romans 5:1. One of our greatest joys and privileges to see people brought into a new relationship with God and Jesus Christ, which as partners in the process identifies us potentially as peacemakers. It's not something passive. We get involved. We're active in the process as well. The ultimate peacemaker, of course, is whom? Who's the Prince of Peace? Jesus. He's the ultimate. The Prince of Peace. He's the one who has made all and any peace possible. Without him, there would be no peace of any sort, really, through his sacrifice of atonement, appeasing the requirements of a holy God. And without such a peace, there is nothing but discord. Discord can never bring righteousness. It just won't happen. Then there's this inheritance from God as well. What does it say? They will be called children of God. Interesting. Peacemakers will be called children of God. They have a divine paternity, it seems here, like an inheritance from above. The word order in the original is actually a little dramatic. They, sons of God, shall be called. Sounds a little more dramatic. It's what you can be here. It's coming your way. As in the they is emphatic, and there are no others. They shall be called sons of God. So as members in God's family, you can help bring in others, and you can help bring them in via peace. You can probably remember a time, perhaps in your life, when Christ came in, his presence and the Spirit of God. And what comes with that? Quite often the stories include a sense of peace and well-being and calm and contentment. You can share that. You can share what you know. You can share your experience. Now, a true peacemaker, contrary to what people think, isn't afraid, of making waves just a little bit. That's what happens. And when we share a message, a couple of responses are possible. Some will favorably respond and find peace, and others will what? Maybe reject, react, maybe even persecute. That's our next word. So you see how they lead together, and when we get to the end, we're going to go backwards through them all again as well, just quickly. So there's the pure, the peacemakers, and then the persecuted as well. Verses 10 through 12. Let me just read it here. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Quite a statement, quite an affirmation. Is that a promise or what? Someone has calculated, I heard this week actually, and the person who was sharing it didn't even want to stand on the number to confirm it, but he says, I've heard that there's 7,464 different promises in the Bible. 7,464 different people, different times, different contexts. They're not all for us. Not every promise in the book is mine, every chapter, every verse, every line. It's not all for you. Some are for other people, and some are for people in the future. But that's the number anyway. So, looking at what we have here, you may remember that the Apostle Paul had promised his young apprentice Timothy this: everyone who wants to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. 2 Timothy 3:12. Is that a great promise or what? No, is that the kind of promise you want to pin up in the kitchen? You know, on the fridge with flowers and birds and little things on there? You know, persecution, bring it on. Poet William Blake, in contemplating this, he wrote it this way: joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine. That's rich. Interesting. He understood that joy and woe are part of the fabric of life that God weaves and lovingly prepares as clothing for his children. Wow. Here again, something mysterious and paradoxical. There is a relationship between joy and persecution. Really? Yeah. Authors in the Puritan era noted in this passage how Jesus repeated himself here, 2 or 3 times for this beatitude, because the statement was just so incredible. Like, are you kidding? So he said it over. He really camped on this one. Persecution can come in different ways, of course. To your face, behind your back, physical aggression, or just emotional manipulation. Keep your attitude and your outlook balanced. Keep in mind that you are blessed and approved by God in this. You are. God is sovereign. He is watching. Persecution, as we said, has been a constant in all of church history. 2,000 years now, 20 centuries. Persecution is not something that God will choose to bring on us. It's the result of evil intent. That's where it comes from. Don't miss that. But he's never outmaneuvered by it either. Like, oh no, they're being persecuted. Oh, stink. What am I going to do now? And he's up in heaven wringing his hands. And what am I going to do now? And the left, the wokish are winning. And what are we going to do? And then they're crazy on the right as well. And, it's not surprising him either. We likely grow and learn more from the hard times than we do the good. You probably know that. Pressure brings change and growth. But it doesn't mean they say you go looking for persecution either. Oh, bring it on. I want some persecution. I know people that used to pray for that. They used to pray for persecution in the church. They think, well, the church really needs us. I'm not sure I can actually pray that, but God will bring it or it'll just be there. Just be ready to be the peacemaker. Remember, that's the bigger picture here. Peacemakers in conflict. Peacemakers face this picture here of persecution as well. If people never react to you, if you're never facing or experiencing any of this, and if they are never responding to you, you kind of wonder what sort of a role you're playing, actually. Maybe it's time to speak up and stir the pot a little bit. Is your mouth opening enough? If people are never responding, what role are you playing? So when asked, don't be shy, say something. As they say, this is old now, don't be an undercover Christian. You just sort of have to speak up a little bit and see what happens and leave that with the Lord. You might remember meekness from last time is what? Is meekness weakness? No. Meekness is strength under control. I have strength and I'm under control. Neat picture of that just quickly. Something extra I'll throw in here. Jesus and meekness. Jesus the meek and the mild. Was Jesus the meek and the mild? Was his the ultimate meekness? Picture of meekness, example of meekness? Yes, he was. Meek Jesus. But not in the way that we would think, necessarily produces meekness in us as well. Theologian Michael Bauman has put it this way. He's commented, this is Jesus, the meek and the mild. At various times, and when the situation demanded, Jesus publicly denounced sinners as snakes, dogs, foxes, hypocrites, foul tombs, and dirty dishes. He actually referred to one of his chief disciples as Satan. So that his hearers would not miss the point, he sometimes referred to the object of his most intense ridicule, both by name and by position, often face to face. Christ did not affirm sinners. He affirmed the repentant. He well understood that sometimes it is wrong to be nice. Interesting observation. The meek and the mild. Sometimes you have to speak up. But if you are persecuted, let it be for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. Can we be persecuted for the wrong reasons? Is it possible to be persecuted for the wrong reasons? What do you think? Well, the answer is yes. Yeah. Joseph Bailey wrote a satire years ago. You might have heard of the title. It's called The Gospel Blimp. Ever heard of that title? The Gospel Blimp. It humorously portrays times when Christians mistakenly think they are being persecuted. They're being persecuted for the wrong reasons. Believers in a small town were desiring to share their faith, so they got themselves a blimp. It was piloted back and forth over town, flying back and forth, and they dragged banners, like, advertising banners behind the blimp as well. And then they started dropping gospel tracts. They called them gospel bombs into people's backyards. This is satire. And when townspeople were, the townspeople were fairly tolerant of that as well, but then turned hostile when the blimp, they equipped it with large loudspeakers, and they began assaulting people with really noisy gospel broadcasts as it flew overhead. And the locals had enough, and that night the blimp was sabotaged. And the locals had enough, and of course the Christians called it persecution. No, it's not persecution. Sadly, Christians can be rejected for the wrong reasons. Being unpleasant, obnoxious, insensitive, thoughtless, even rude. In our context, it's the righteousness of the believer that leads to persecution. It's your identification with Christ. It is your righteousness that shines through. That's good. That's good. Can we be persecuted for the right reasons then, if I can say it? Yes, of course. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You might know the name. You all know the name. Dietrich Bonhoeffer didn't live that long, actually. 1906 to 1945. Started a seminary for the Confessing Church in Finkenwald. When he did that, he modeled it on the Sermon on the Mount. This was his favorite passage. Wrote about it. He was a fierce opponent of Hitler. Bonhoeffer and his colleagues employed the Beatitudes to confront the devilish Nazi propaganda machine. He believed that the Sermon on the Mount could provide the necessary ground for resistance against tyranny. He learned it, he lived it. He said this, that dying to self, confession, meditation, and intercession produced openness, they believed this, and the solidarity necessary for moral risk-taking. That this passage is, if you just live it, it can be sufficient as well to face the culture you live in. He would die for his faith in prison, though, actually 2 weeks before the end of the war in Europe. 2 weeks. A few decades later, more in our era, a Romanian pastor named Richard Wurmbrand, founder of Voices of the Martyrs, described how he was imprisoned for preaching and tortured mercilessly, and yet experienced in prison an incredible joy. Alone in his cell, after one of his severe beatings, he says this, the miraculous power of the Holy Spirit came upon him, and he felt a joy like he had never felt before or since. And he found himself dancing in his cell. He says that never happened again. He was later released. Never happened again. Never happened again. Bonhoeffer wrote, "Suffering is a true badge of discipleship. The disciple is not above his master." Interesting. Blessed are the persecuted. The term here for persecution simply means to chase or pursue. A good translation is to harass. That's a good translation. Blessed are the harassed. For righteousness. Not just harassed because you dress funny, but harassed. The harassed. To give someone a hard time, we might say they are in your face. That's a picture of persecution here as well. But as we said before, don't lose heart. Something great is coming. It's in this verse as well. This passage also refers to future justice. Great is your reward. Great is your reward. The word means immeasurably great. Immeasurably great. God will not permit what has been done for his glory to go unrewarded. He will never be your debtor. Never. What will it be like for such believers with their first 30 seconds in heaven? Will it be worth it all? Their first minute, their first hour, their first day in heaven, it's like, this was worth it. First 10,000 years. Yeah. All these Beatitudes are connected and will sort of tie together as we end this morning as well. Remember, it's the peacemaker who is the persecuted. Opening your mouth. I've opened my mouth. People ask me what I think about things. I say something. Tell them. Tell them. Tell them what you think. What do you think about a grown man dressed as a garish female prostitute, reading stories to children? What do you think? I'm not telling you what I think. What do you think? Just say it. Just say it. Don't be afraid of that as well. They're connected. The peacemaker. This is all to bring peace as well. We are peacemakers in this process. We're not just stirring the pot. We're peacemakers. But the peacemakers are the persecuted. And if you're not a peacemaker, could it be that you're not pure in heart? We're just going to go backwards through this as well. That is, I'm not single-minded with, this one thing is my big thing, sense of direction. I've got my big thing. Everything else just attaches to it and is in sync with it. Or you may have all kinds of interests and values, but is there one thing that rules them all? If you're not pure in heart, it may be that you're not merciful, more concerned to give than to receive. If you're not merciful, it may be that you're not hungering and thirsting after righteousness. We're going backwards through it now as well. Concern for what is right. If you're not hungering and thirsting after righteousness, it may be that you are not meek. Last week. Humbly submitting yourself to Christ as Lord. If you're not meek, it may be that you're not mourning or may have never mourned your state of spiritual bankruptcy, that I have nothing to bring. I come with nothing in my hands. Lord, I just humbly submit to you. If you're not mourning, it may be because you don't know that you are really poor in spirit. You still think you've got what it takes to make it in this life, and I'll get to heaven my way. I'll just be good enough. If you don't recognize your poverty of spirit, you're not blessed yet. You just haven't even started at the beginning, back where we were several weeks ago as well. So this list of 9 Beatitudes here is not a disconnected list of unrelated qualities. They flow directly from one to the other, to the other, to the other. By the time they get to the end, you experience persecution. It's coming. I take it. It's for God's glory. It's been built in my life. That's why we build these things, link by link by link. Each building a portrait of blessing, of God's blessing and God's approval. Blessed are all these things. Today, thank you for your Spirit, Lord, that talks to us concerning our purity of heart, our single-mindedness. Yes, it will deal with moral purity. We will get to that in the Beatitudes. We are to be morally pure and distinct and clean. But that's what we're looking at here, to be pure, to be peacemakers, to not be afraid of that. We can help bring peace into people's lives, peace with Christ, peace with fellow men. And here as we finish today, we've considered persecution as well. not a topic we enjoy addressing. But you have told us that it's part of normal discipleship to be harassed as believers in Jesus. But for your glory, you will bring great things. You are glorified in this life and in the life to come. The meek will inherit the earth. That's a for now, and that's for the future as well. Thank you for these things today. Take something, Spirit of God, and touch our hearts with it, our minds with it. What do we need to take with us today from this teaching? Plant a seed deep in our hearts. May it grow into good things these days as we grow in your grace. We thank you now in Jesus' name. Amen.